welcome back to part 2.
Thanks for having me.
You're more than welcome. So in part 1, we were talking a little bit about how paid media has changed over the last couple of years, 4 or 5 years, since you've been doing it. Talking quite a bit about automation. This episode, we're going to talk about kind of, I guess, what's working, what the current challenges are for people, like the tangible stuff, the outlook for the rest of the year, all of those kinds of things. So looking forward to digging into that.
Yeah, let's go for it.
We'll get the crystal ball out and make some predictions. But I guess first off, how do you feel about the current state of paid media or where paid media is at? Because with all of those changes we were talking about in part 1, which if you haven't listened to, you should definitely listen to. But with all those changes, we're losing visibility on stuff, on data. The granular levers of control have gone, or in some degree have gone. Some of that I think is positive, some of it's negative. Mm-hmm. What's your take? Do you think we're in a good place with paid media as it stands?
Yeah, I think so. Everything's become more commercially focused, and I think whilst challenging stuff like attribution dropping out and those kind of things happening, it kind of creates the opportunity for new conversations, new ways of doing things, and it kind of steers people back. It almost goes full circle with the more automation and machine learning that's come in. It almost forces you to have those broader business conversations of, let's take a more holistic view of what are we spending, what are we returning over the month as a business. Yeah. Overall.
Yes.
As opposed to kind of looking into the granularity of, well, GA says this, so that's the P&L. You have to take a much more broader scope on it now. I
actually think that's a really positive, side effect of these changes is that you can no longer just go and look at the ROAS in Google ads or Facebook ads and that's what you're looking at. You have to look at, well, how is that actually impacting my growth? Is the chart going up? If not, why not? What's the P&L view? Like you said, total marketing spend, total revenue. How does that look? Is that improving? Is that profitable? If you cannot just look at the platforms anymore, you have to take a bigger business view, and that's definitely not a bad thing.
No, for sure. I think it actually the P&L views your real source of truth view on stuff, and I think there's been a lot of different channels with different formats of various things. Like Facebook remarketing was a great example. Klaviyo pop-ups, anything that comes in and is more of a acquisition driver. It's more of an attribution taker in the customer journey, if that makes sense. So you've got your paid campaigns on, you've got search coming to the website, pop-up comes up, drops a cookie. That's now taking full credit for the sale that happened, and paid is taking full credit for the sale that happened, and potentially Facebook's taking credit for the one sale that's happened. So you've then got that over-reporting of 3 sales and 1 actual sale. And I think having that broader P&L view enables you to look at something from that helicopter perspective to go, there's an extraordinary claim over here that this is 10x revenue overnight by implementing this. Is the actual business seeing that? Because it's not about perfection, but you will see the line go up if that's genuinely happened.
Yes.
You would be seeing the line go up, and the business would be going, what have you done? Because we're really busy and it's great.
Yep.
So yeah, I think being that slightly more that way minded is helpful anyway, because it sort of reduces silos of different channels and it brings things to that holistic perspective to go, is the business actually growing or is it not? Also brings with it the challenges that you're going to have different conversations with that in mind, and your point of contact, your team might not be used to having those types of conversations, so you've got that challenge that I think there's an education piece to happen alongside the change, if that makes sense.
Yeah, big time. Absolutely. We were talking about it before, weren't we, about it's not just a platform series of changes, it's the mindset has to shift with it, otherwise you get totally left behind and just not working with it. That's not a good thing. So I think we're both in agreement that actually we're in a positive place with it all.
For sure. Yeah.
But where are people getting stuck? What do you see as the most common challenges when you're talking to brands or clients or just people in general?
Yeah. So I think the biggest challenge that I still see in paid is what happens post-click. So it's not so much the campaigns themselves. I don't think it ever has been to some extent either. Targeting and copy and stuff is obviously an important factor, but generally speaking, that's not the bigger lever to pull. It's what happens when they get to the website. Is the page relevant? Is the copy clear? Is the proposition clear? What's the pricing? Like what objections do people have when they come to this website from the campaign, then also more broadly in general to the business?
Yeah.
And one of the things which I find is like a really useful exercise for all businesses to go through is to put like Hotjar, Microsoft Clarity on the site and start to try and ask the data some of those questions to go, people have come to the site. We know the targeting is relevant in the campaign. So let's take like searches as a great example. Someone's actively searching for the product. You've captured that person's click. They're coming through to your website. They are qualified to at least some degree to buy the product or service that you're offering on the site.
Yep.
However, they are going to have buying objections, hesitations, doubts, etc.
Then what?
So like, do you know what they are? And if not, how can you capture that data to find out what they are? How can you present that stuff so that if someone has a hesitation when the page loads, typical stuff, when am I going to get it? Is it trusted? What if I don't like it? If I want to send it back? Is that stuff clear on the page? Because if it's not, people will just bounce and they'll go to a different supplier. And what you tend to find then is, you can be looking under the paid media lamppost to some extent for the solution to why performance isn't working, but actually the answer's over here quite a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And again, that is a different way of thinking and a different type of experience that you'd need to have to do that. So I think people come across that problem a lot because actually creating campaigns now has never been easier, but getting performance has got a lot harder.
Yeah, big time. And absolutely agree with that. There's also I think we see a lot of challenges or people getting stuck with things like just not understanding how the data imports work or what data you really need to get a campaign working and running properly, or how to optimize the shopping feed properly, or those types of things that get left behind a little bit because people still are just focused on the individual campaigns or the platform tactics. And I think understanding the full spectrum of stuff that you need to get right in order to have success is actually it's pretty challenging.
Yeah,
it's not an easy task.
No, and it's I think one of the other interesting things that's happened with machine learning and automation is that a lot of kind of historic ways of thinking about even just simple stuff like metrics has changed. So the way you think needs to change as well as like what you think. So to give you an example, 5-6 years ago, you would reason by analogy that the more impressions we get, the more clicks we'll get. The more clicks we'll get, the more sales we'll get.
Yeah.
So you then find yourself optimizing to get the most possible impressions in a campaign, which now, when you enable a smart bidding strategy, the bidding strategy is trying to go, what's the fewest amount of clicks I can get? Because every time we pay for a click, we're incurring cost. So I only want to bid on the people that have the highest chance of buy-in.
Yep.
So you see some inverse in the metrics sometimes where, you start to roll out these types of campaigns and you go, well, clicks, impressions went down, but actually sales went up because the conversion rate increased. And that kind of defies our common sense about how campaigns should perform.
More there, then more there, then more there, then more there. And it's not the same, is it?
No, it's not at all. Like same with like average CPC. Historically, you think, right, well, if we can get click costs down, then cost per acquisition will come down and ROAS will increase. But you might see the same thing now where you get a higher CPC, but if it's offset by a higher conversion rate, it's irrelevant. What matters is the sales and the cost per acquisition at the end of it. So
yeah, definitely. I think there's a big challenge there around very carefully considering your objectives. And what I mean by that is it's very easy to have conflicting objectives that on the surface make total sense. I'd like to get more sales, which means more revenue. Yep. So I'm going to target that on ROAS or CPA. But I'd also like to get more traffic than I did have last year. And I'd like to get more people just engaging with the site and more eyeballs on the brand. And actually, exactly what you said there. And I think this has been the case with Meta for quite a long time, actually, and is now a big part of Google Ads, is that if you're targeting ROAS, let's call it ROAS or sales, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get more traffic.
No.
And you would set a campaign up and optimize a campaign in a completely different way if you wanted more traffic. And often more sales means more expensive traffic because you're being more focused on the traffic that is more likely to buy, so you pay a premium for that, and they conflict. And it's weird because more should mean more, but it doesn't always mean more.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, it defies our idea of what common sense was in paid like 7-10 years ago, because it doesn't fit into that classic linear way of thinking, and that's difficult because sometimes it does though as well. There are times where you increase the budget, the impressions and the clicks go up, and the sales go up. But
It's not always the same.
Yeah. So, but I think in those instances as well, it's why you need to have the ability to have those more strategic conversations to say, okay, if you do want more engagement or more traffic to the website, like what's the highest purpose of that? Like, what is that extra traffic from last year for?
Yeah.
Because we want more people to come and see our products. What's the highest purpose of people come and see more of your products? Because we need to get more sales, because we need to get more revenue. You can almost always distill it back into the same outputs that the campaign is trying to optimize for in terms of sales and revenue. But again, to have that conversation and to bring that, constructive challenge to a business is not always the easiest thing to do.
No, it's not. But it's a really important point, and we do see a lot of people getting stuck just on that bit alone. So in terms of like what you see working, what would your like 2, 3, you can pick the number. What would your biggest recommendations be for someone running either paid social or paid search this year? Like, what would you say, like, right, here are the biggest things I'd recommend?
Try as much as possible to start with audiences that have like some degree of intent to purchase.
Yeah.
Sounds obvious on the face of it, but it's not always the case. There's so many options of audiences, campaign formats, channels to run that sometimes you can want to just let's try everything and then see what works afterwards.
Yeah. Pick your battles.
Yeah, like start with, what are the product searches? Are they being captured? Is that converting? Because if that's not converting an interest audience on Facebook, you're probably going to struggle even harder because you don't even have that qualification level on the user. So I think you've got to start where you've got some degree of qualification. That will enable you to troubleshoot website experience and just find out, if I've got qualified customers coming to the site and they're not buying, can we solve those problems first and then build out and expand afterwards? The other thing that I think is useful at the moment as well is to not get too focused on trying to push for so let's say you've got an account, whether it's Meta or Google, in your core market, you will naturally get to like a plateau of performance where revenue return is stable and you're struggling to scale it. And I think at that point, my personal approach then is to go, how do we start setting up again next to it? How do we go to a new territory? How do we add a new product into the mix? What are people looking for that's associated, and try and build next to it and just ring fence that performance and protect it? Because sometimes fighting so hard to get like an extra 5% on something that's already working, when it's reached that plateau, you can burn a lot of spend in testing, when actually getting set up in a different market can bring a lot of new revenue into the business and grow that way.
That's really about knowing when to not hold or fold, but this is where experience kicks in, isn't it? Because you'll know when you've hit that ceiling and you need to do something else, but also it's really bad if you haven't hit that ceiling and you've got something that's working, you're not maximizing it, and then you're branching out beforehand.
Yeah, that's not ideal.
You're not being efficient either. So knowing when that point kicks in and being able to recognize that is a big skill.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's that thing again, it goes back to strategy. It's the difference between having a plan and having a strategy, like being able to say, we could do this here and we could fight for that extra 5% and we're aware that we could do that. Or we could go and do this. And they're both opportunities and they're both potentially problems to not take at the same time. But what's the better problem to have? Do you want to spend a load of time, resource focus, ad spend, whatever it might be, on trying to get that 5%? Or is it more valuable to the business to try and get established in a new market like US, Australia, Ireland, wherever it might be?
Yeah.
And the answer varies, and that's the interesting discussion to have. But you can't see it on like there's a right or wrong thing to do. It's that approach of like, I know there's 5% more here, but it's going to take however long of time, months, energy, ad spend to try and get that extra 5%.
Yeah.
When actually we could build to 60 over here based on what we've already learned here as well.
Yeah.
So
it's just so nuanced, isn't it? And it just plays into that point. No ad account is ever the same, and you have to really learn and test and experiment to find out what's going to work on each individual account.
For sure.
It's just always different. So how do you see the rest of the year playing out? Like, what do you think Q4 is going to be like this year, because there's not really been a quote unquote normal year for a while. Like we had COVID, then e-commerce went crazy, cost of living like there's just loads of stuff, isn't there, always going on. So what do you think? What's your prediction for Q4 this year?
Genuinely, as unhelpful as this is an answer, I literally don't know what to expect. I think based on what I have seen in the last couple of years, Black Friday every year seems to be something that declines in terms of performance. You always see an uplift, but it's not as mental as it was. You know, I think people shop around more. I think people are savvy to sort of big discounting on products, and they're not that concerned anymore. It's more about what's the best product to buy. Why would I buy from this business? Like normal purchase objections, as opposed to just the cheapest price. So I think, as always, every year, I think now is the time to start planning what you're going to do, because you want campaigns at least mapped out by start of September. Campaigns created to avoid rushes. But again, you know, thinking back like 5 years ago, there was a point where if your Black Friday campaigns weren't made the week before Black Friday, they wouldn't get through ad approval. And that was always fun. I've not seen that for a long time, but you know, just being prepared, I guess, and then like being prepared to pivot as well if something's not working. My approach for peak is always to build big and then cut during peak period. Let's say it's Black Friday weekend, rather than trying to build new stuff, because every time something goes into approval, you've got 4 to 6 hours at least to wait, and you're just missing out on opportunity. So I tend to make a massive campaign if it's meta, with every possible eventuality that I think might work on it, and then I'm just turning stuff off and just cutting off what's not working, rather than trying to implement new stuff, you know.
I think that scenario planning is really key, because I think this year will be lots of different products or sectors. I think it's going to be a real variety and mixed bag. And being able to adapt really quickly, I think, is the most important thing. So, having scenarios for, okay, it's going better than we thought. How do we scale this and make the most of it? It's not quite going as well as we thought. What do we do? That, I think, is big.
Yeah, for sure.
As a thing, because it's going to be different, that's for sure. And like you say, I think Black Friday is not quite as big as it was. Or it's more extended. It's slightly more drawn out. So that massive like spike isn't quite as pronounced. It's more of a.
It's like a couple of weeks now, isn't it?
More of a hill.
It's and then you see it like more into the start of December, I think, as well. It's just general peak periods. As opposed to, like you say, like before, it was like the massive boom and then would just really tail off. It's more of a just a gradual till sort of shipping time stop for Christmas, really, isn't it, generally speaking?
I also wonder how many retailers will decide not to do it this year. Because if you look at you obviously cost of advertising, reduce margins, because if you want to stand out in Black Friday, your discount's got to be decent, otherwise no one's going to bother. So when you take everything like that into account, is it worth it? And I think if you've got e-com brands or retailers who are, looking at tighter budgets this year, the margins are already squeezed because of increased costs and everything else that's going on, will there be more brands not partaking?
Yeah, potentially.
I think that particular weekend.
Yeah, and I think as well, just to add on top of that, even though it's enough to deal with on its own, is you are at a place now because of automation where everyone's going to be running a Google Ads Performance Max campaign, a catalog campaign in Meta. Everyone's got Shopify, everyone's got Klaviyo. You've got such comparable tech stack and tactics that the person that's going to compete best is the person that understands the customer the most, which has gone full circle back to traditional marketing, because that is where you're going to compete, because you have all the same tools as everybody else now. Those who are going to win the most are going to be the ones that understand the customer. When they come to the site, what are their buying objections? How do we address them in the best possible way? To
and having planned all that and dealt with that all beforehand.
Before peak,
yeah, absolutely. But it'll be interesting, and it'll be interesting to kind of look at the trends this year versus last year and see what's kind of working. But look, Byron, thank you so much again for popping down. Like 2 brilliant chats. I'm sure everyone's really enjoyed it. And hope to see you at some sort of event or shindig or something soon.
Yeah, hopefully see you again soon. Thanks for having me down. I really appreciate it. And it's been great to see you in person again. It's been it's been a while.
It's been too long. It's been way too long. But yeah, thank you so much. And really hope everyone who's listened to these 2 episodes has enjoyed them. Please do subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed that episode, please do come and subscribe. Join us for future episodes where we talk about the ins and outs of running paid media and driving improved conversions and revenue for your business. See you next time.